Raymond Benson, welcome back to Suit Up the Podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me back on.
Oh, absolutely. Not only are you well read, you have amazing music suggestions that you drop on a routine basis, but you've also, like, it'd be one thing if you just wrote Bond books. That would be incredible enough. But you wrote the Black Stiletto series, which is the main point of having you back on the show. Because when we interviewed you first, I had literally just marathon reading the first one. And it wasn't because I was trying to cram to get in. I'm like, I can't read everything the prolific writer writes before I have them on the show. But this is a really good book, which means I basically could not stop turning pages when I started reading it.
Well, that's the goal. I mean, anybody that writes thrillers, especially, thrillers are meant to be fast-paced, page turners. Mysteries, yeah, but not so much. It's the thriller that's I mean, sometimes there's the question, what's the difference between a mystery and a thriller?
Hmm.
Mysteries are, who done it, why done it, how done it, and there's a procedural thing going through it, and then there's like the surprise,
Hmm.
of who done it, how done it, why done it. Thrillers are all about, oh my God, are we going to get out of this alive?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing with I did a big Agatha Christie read earlier this year. And I hadn't read many of her thrillers. I had read obviously like Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple, the classic things you're used to, Murder on the Orient Express. But I'd picked up The Secret Adversary, which there's a mystery element to it, but most of it is a question of basically getting from one end of the book to the other.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's just
yeah,
the remarkable thing.
yeah. And thrillers is like trying to do something before a time limit,
Hmm. Like writing a
gotta,
book.
well, that, but yeah, yeah, writing a book is like a thriller, sure. Um, with a lot of obstacles.
So the Black Stiletto, just as a refresher for the audience, how did you come up with this series? Like, what was the impetus when you wrote it?
Oh boy. How do let's see, boy, we're going back a while, 15 years. It was 2009, 2009. And I
The
had
golden
an a
age.
yeah, I had an agent at the time. He's not my agent anymore. In fact, he's a late agent. Um, he we were having a conversation. I had in my head sort of I was playing around with an idea of about a mystery or a thriller about a grown man
Hmm.
who's taking care of his mother who has Alzheimer's. And he discovers some dark secret about her
Hmm.
but I didn't really know what that secret was. That was based on real life experiences here. My wife and I were taking care of her mother who
Hmm.
had Alzheimer's,
Hmm.
and we had moved her to an assisted living place near us, and she was, rapidly declining and stuff. And so for really about 12 years, we were dealing with, you know, my mother-in-law who had Alzheimer's. So it was all very real.
Hmm.
So I was thinking about that, but I didn't know what it was. At the same time, around that time, if you remember, around 2008
Hmm.
and 09, Marvel started happening. We
We
had the
got
Dark
Iron
Knight.
Man, The
Yeah,
Dark Knight.
yeah, and then we had the Dark Knight and all this. Superheroes were suddenly kind of going into the mainstream.
Hmm.
And I met with my agent. We had lunch together or something like that, and we were talking about, well, what should I do next? And it just popped in my head, and I said, oh, he was saying, women are the most people who buy the most books. Women
Yeah.
do. And so you should maybe try to write something that would appeal to women. And I just kind of facetiously said, how about a female superhero? And he went, ah, that would be great. That's perfect. And then so I started thinking about that. And then the other idea about the Alzheimer's kind of merged. And I went,
Uh-huh.
oh my God, that's the secret. That's the dark secret. The mother was not really a superhero, but a vigilante, a masked
Hmm.
crusader. Um, so that's how it started. And then it just fell into place. It practically
Hmm.
wrote itself, that first book. So I wrote it in 2009. It took a while to find a publisher that would want it. Um, there was this startup company called Ocean View at the time, and I knew the owners because they were coming to Thriller Fest. I would be going to Thriller Fest, this thriller writing conference in New York,
Hmm.
and I knew them, and they were starting this company, and so I pitched it to them, and they were very excited. So the Black Stiletto was one of the first books that they published. Now, now Ocean View's, pretty well
Yeah.
known. They've got a lot of stuff. So, I told them, I said, I want this to be, I had in mind it was going to be a 5 book serial. I knew that from
Hmm.
the beginning.
Hmm.
Um, and, I kind of wanted to be like Harry Potter, a 5 book serial.
Yeah, it has a
Uh,
arc to it.
yes, it all tells one big story divided up into 5 books.
Hmm.
Um, and I kind of knew how I wanted the 5th book to end,
Hmm.
but I didn't know all the stuff in between. I just knew, the I outlined the first book,
Hmm.
and I kind of thought about, okay, where's the
This is where it
story going to
lands.
go? Yeah, that's where it's going to go. But I didn't know book 2, book 3, or really book 4. I kind of had an idea of something happening about, going to LA and
Hmm.
ending there. But I said, look, you have to commit to 5 books. We're going to do this first book, sure, but it's going to be a serial. And I don't want to have to go to another publisher to do the other
Yeah.
books. And they said, we're in. We like this book so much that we'll do all 5. So that was the deal.
That's awesome. Especially since because you do set up everything perfectly in book one. Like we were just talking pre-hitting the record button. That first book in a series has to do a lot of heavy lifting to kind of establish the world and the characters.
Yeah.
So much so like in a pilot of a TV show, it feels a little different because it has spent so much time creating the characters in the world. But really, like we're off to the races the moment the Black Stiletto starts.
Well, I really there's a lot of me in it, too. It takes place in my community, the Chicago,
Yeah.
the Illinois sections is really in my world. And the facility where she she lives is the exact facility where my mother-in-law was.
Mm.
I changed the name
Yeah.
and all that. And I use real places, Buffalo Grove, Arlington
Hmm.
Heights.
Oh yeah, I grew up in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. So
Oh
everything you're
yeah,
describing, my mom is from uh Northbrook. So
oh
like
sure,
everything you're describing, I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly where that is.
yeah, yeah. And then there's that little bit of Wisconsin area in
Yes.
southern Wisconsin, around Racine.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It was really cool reading, and it's neat when you actually know where
Kenosha.
the places are.
Yeah.
But realistically, like you don't even have to know that to enjoy the places, because
No, right,
even
right.
the Texas bits, because you're originally from
Yeah.
Texas, if I remember right.
Yeah, Odessa. That was my town. That's where I grew up. I went to high school there. So yeah, I set so that part there. And then I lived in New York City for many, many years. So
Hmm.
that was I love writing in New York because so much of it has not changed. I mean,
Hmm.
you go into sort of midtown, yeah, all the stores and the restaurants and things are the same, but the buildings are still there. The layout is still there. You go into
Hmm.
the neighborhoods, they're all the same pretty much, and
Hmm.
you can set something in New York City in the 50s and the 60s and it wouldn't be too different, you just got to get the technology right. So,
Well, that's okay. So, talking about the technology here briefly, I think that that's one of the interesting parts of because so the book's timeline, I'm trying to remember if you give a specific year for when Martin's story is, but it's at that golden age of time where we haven't quite gotten to the Uber technology. Everything is like super
Right.
saturated.
It's interesting, Judy's
Yeah.
story in the past takes 5 years. It's
Hmm.
1 year for each book.
Yep.
However, Martin's story is one full year over the
Yeah.
books. So, and it's the year to, I think 2011. I mean, I think I
Hmm.
started it or 2010 or 2011. So it's
Hmm.
one of those. It's whenever the books were came out. That's
Hmm.
and so it's a whole full year. His story is just a few months in
Yeah.
each book.
It
So
just it's a good timeline because that's a period where technology is just big enough, and you do use it in a couple of places where because the story of the Black Stiletto is like having this reappearance, it isn't quite that thing where it's getting like super viral, but just enough that it is popping up here and there. But also, we're not at the point where you can Google absolutely anything and use ChatGPT and all this stuff.
right,
Like
yeah,
it really is neat where it hits just that right golden age for the 2000s. But then also, this was something I really enjoyed with Judy's timeline is that the story of the Black Stiletto hits all of my like genre buttons because it is like it's superhero, but it also feels like the golden age pulps, like the
yeah,
shadow.
yeah,
And that's my jam. It also has like a strong noir gangster, and each book kind of has almost this extra flavor of genre just spiced in.
yeah. That was all very intentional. Yeah, yeah. Her story is, if it was a movie, her stuff would be black and white, and
Mm-hmm.
then the present would be in color. That's how I would direct it anyway.
Yeah.
So,
I'm curious, when you were thinking through 5 books, how much was there any conscious decision to try making it like 5 act structure for the story and the arc?
uh, I not really. I mean, I knew it was going to be five different
Yeah.
books. I mean, there are acts within each book.
Yeah.
Um, the books four and five, the
Hmm.
last two are really one book that I
Yes.
that's like, the ending of book four is definitely a to be continued
Yes.
cliffhanger. I kind of wrote those two together. I mean, I
Hmm.
didn't stop. I just wrote those two as if it was one book, and then
Yeah.
and then went in the middle.
You really had to because
Yeah,
book 4 and 5, this was the thing when it's 5 books. Like I have every confidence in the world in you, but when I see 5 books, I'm like, okay, this series has been really good as it continues to build. I'm like, how is he going to stick the landing? Because ending a series is it's tricky. Like it's the third act, that finale. The can it pay off everything satisfactorily? And you managed to land the plane so perfectly in book 5, really book 4 and 5, because book 4, you start to get the payoffs dribbling in towards the end, and it builds to the crescendo that basically book 5 feels like it's all climax, and it's amazing.
well, I appreciate that. I really think, you know, book four, especially, is maybe the best book I ever wrote. I really love it, and book five. Those are my two favorite of the whole five, just
Hmm.
because it was so complex. The weaving in
Hmm.
and out the storylines and how I was going to end each little plot segment, and also there's two storylines going, the
Yeah.
present day one and the past one, and you had to
Hmm.
make them both sort of work and also dovetail. So yeah, yeah,
I
it took a lot of thought and hair pulling, when I was outlining those.
hmm because also you do a great job using the settings because books 4 and 5, we have a lot of LA, and you get that good like 60s LA vibe, which again, the period piece parts of it are so delicious because it really is that. I mean, obviously I'm a Bond fan. I enjoy that raison d'etre, that milieu, that taste and flavor, but it's not just the window dressing. It's a good story happening that could only happen at that time and that place. And
Right.
that I think is tough sometimes for people writing within period. is that they use the period to like try elevating the material rather than just having this story could take place at this time.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's how I looked at it. I mean, that's when she was a young woman, and that's when she was active as the Black Stiletto. It had to be kind of during that period, for her to be now in her 70s
Mm-hmm.
undergoing severe Alzheimer's. That's just kind of when the timing worked out. Um, yeah. And it wasn't so far back that the research
Mm-hmm.
was not impossible. I mean, a lot of the places that are in the books still exist.
Mm-hmm. Which also does add to it because, like we were talking about with New York, is that someone can still walk there and kind of feel the
Yeah,
vibe of the story and the places and the settings.
right, right.
It's not
Well,
like a complete ancient world.
right. That bar that she goes to in LA, now I'm blanking on the name, but that's still there. I went there, you
Oh,
know, and
that's so cool.
it still looks exactly like it did, in 1961 and 62. Um, Starts with a B. What was it? I forget. Oh, well.
Uh,
Um,
I actually had a specific question. So speaking of bees, you in the first book you mentioned that she like sees a Batman comic, I think is sitting on like her
yeah,
boyfriend's table.
right.
And that's part
Yeah.
of what churns the ideas. I'm just curious, did you have a favorite comic book superhero growing up or still a fan of them?
I was a Marvel guy.
Really?
Sort of back then, you were either DC or you were Marvel. I knew
Mm-hmm.
very few people that did both. I was a kid when the Silver Age of Marvel really just
Ooh,
sprouted.
that's the
I owned Spider-Man #1, Amazing Spider-Man #1. I collected a lot of those early between 1962 or well, really 63, and between 63 and 68, I was buying Marvel comics. I mean, that was my elementary school and junior high school years. And by the time I got to like age 12 or 13, I decided, oh, this is kid stuff. And I stopped buying comic books. But I had, a complete run pretty much of maybe missing two or three issues of the early ones of Spider-Man from #1 up to like 80. I had
wow.
Fantastic Four, same way. I had Thor. I was a big Thor fan. I had some Avengers. I had Daredevil. I had a lot of piecemeal comics.
Mm-hmm.
But it was mainly Spider-Man and Fantastic Four were my favorites.
That's
Um,
really cool.
and there was actually a club you could join in Marvel called the Merry Marvel Marching Society. It was called the MMMS, and that was around 65. And you could send your $1.25 off, and you would get back, these little goodies, stationery with Marvel characters on it, and a little button, and a little plastic flexi record that you could put on the record player, and it would have Stan Lee and all the bullpen guys talking, and telling jokes. If you go on YouTube, you can hear it. They have it, and it's pretty funny actually. They tell a lot of jokes and clown around and stuff. If you you know go to YouTube and search for uh, Merry Marvel Marching Society Stan Lee, you'll probably find it. And there were two records. There was one that came out one year, and then a year later another one, and that had a song on it that they wrote, and they're all singing it. So, but the first one's better when they're all just talking and cracking up and stuff.
I think
So,
that it's almost like that behind the scenes stuff is the most interesting. There's a Frank Sinatra record. It's Ring a Ding Ding. I'm
yeah,
that one. There's a few of the tracks. It has like the slight before and then after of a few of the recordings, and just hearing the guys like talk, and they're like, "All right, we're gonna record this one. All right, one, two," and then they start.
yeah.
And it's just interesting hearing that like other layer. I mean, that's part of why I enjoy doing this show because we get to hear the other layer between books like The Black Stiletto.
Hmm. Now, there is that is optioned, Black Stiletto. It's been optioned really since 2012.
Hmm.
Um, it was almost an ABC television series.
Ooh.
In 2015, the producer who has the option for it got it to ABC, and Mila Kunis was going to executive produce it.
Ooh.
She wasn't going to star in it; she wanted to
Yeah.
executive produce it, and ABC bought it, and they had a Emmy-winning writer do the pilot script, and it was written,
Mm-hmm.
and they actually started to sort of do pre-production on it.
Mm-hmm.
This went over a whole year, and then in 2016,
Oh.
the the upper management of ABC got
Mm-hmm.
kicked out, and they brought in a new
Oh.
president. And the new president just kind of went, "All right, what's on the slate? Oh, I don't like any of this. I'm throwing it out. I'm putting my own stuff in." And so we got the rights back from ABC. So I still have the same producer who has the option. He's still pounding the pavement, trying to, get it done. And there's a lot of interest, but nobody
Mm-hmm.
has ever really. I think, the whole Marvel thing, the
Yeah.
movies, the MCU, and all that, it's kind of saturated the market now.
Yeah. I mean, that's the
And
sad part is that at this point, because there's so much, it's ugh. Which is a
I
pain because I
know,
feel like I feel like this as a show would be something deliciously different in that yes, it has like that surface level of vigilante superhero, but it's got so much more going on.
yeah. Well, the whole Alzheimer's angle, I think, is important. And,
Hmm.
you know, there's so many people that are dealing with a parent or somebody that
Hmm.
has it. I mean, it's a very common story now. I mean, some of the feedback we get from studios and stuff is that, well, we don't like the Alzheimer's angle. It's too depressing. you know, Nobody's going to be interested in that. And we go, are you kidding? People are dealing with it.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I don't understand Hollywood. Hollywood is,
It's an animal, a different beast, a
yeah, it is. It
creature
is.
from the Black Lagoon.
I know. But, I still have, hopes that
Hmm.
somebody's gonna look at it and go, oh, we really like this. And I think it would make a good, streaming
Oh, I think
series.
it would be a great miniseries. Like the being able to have, especially since you have 5 books, there's plenty
Yeah,
of material. And again, the settings, the fact that you can alternate between today's day and age and period
yeah,
really does well.
yeah. Well, that's another thing. One of the other complaints is period pieces are more expensive. So they don't like period pieces. But with CGI now, I mean,
Yeah.
you'd think that would be a lot easier to do. Um, anyway, I think I love my producer. I think he's
Hmm.
great, and he has some clout and good
Hmm.
credits, and
Hmm.
you know keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well,
So
I didn't realize until like this last year, The Queen's Gambit was published in like the 80s and
yeah,
just
I
got a
don't think
mini
it
series.
matters. It
So
shouldn't.
realistically, like I think that's one of the things that I'm realizing is good material will always have a market, and it just takes that one right moment.
Yeah,
And there it is.
yeah.
So
Well,
I'm curious, has there ever been a conversation about continuing the Black Slice series? Because spoiler alert here, like we're
yeah,
going to start
yeah.
getting into spoiler territory.
I
We
left a
left
hint.
things.
I left a hint that it could at least be a different series, a new
Hmm.
series.
Hmm.
Um, so far, I haven't really wanted to try it.
Hmm.
I mean, it's there if I want to. Um, we'll see. But it also was a nice ending too. You can
Hmm.
imagine. Okay, well, you know, that's
The
well,
next
I don't want
stage.
to. Yeah, I don't want to say what that spoiler is, but
Yeah.
um, you can say it was, her her exploits are secret because
Hmm.
they're
Oh, hey, that's a
for the
good.
government.
Yeah,
So
that's a really good angle to take it with.
yeah, so um, but who knows? doesn't mean they can't be adventure,
Hmm.
fiction adventures. Um,
I again, I really enjoy the fact that this series, I think, has a bit for everyone. Because if you like mystery, it has a good mystery to it. If you like thrillers, it's very thrilling. If you like I do, pulp noir, it has strong vibes for that. And it's all wrapped into a compelling story that has 5 books. Listeners,
it's also a women's story.
it's also
I
a
think
woman's story.
women have told me that they like this.
Hmm.
I mean, this appeals to women, and I think
Hmm.
that was one of my goals, right? With
Yeah.
the agent and everything, it was to write something women would like,
Well, and
and I get that a lot.
again, I think that also that adds to the interesting element of the story because it does alternate perspectives between Martin and Judy and their storylines.
Uh,
Even down to so Judy's storyline is written as these diaries that Martin is reading. The diaries feel written in a way that just Martin's internal dialogue doesn't, because again, when we write, it's slightly different than when we speak. It's fascinating. You do a great job of just layering it well.
well, thank you. Yeah, um, getting Judy's voice right, you know, I had to work on that, but once I got it, I think
Hmm.
uh, it was there. Um, I think Martin's voice is probably mine. So
It's here where I tell you quite honestly, anytime I read Martin's part, I heard your voice.
okay. Well, he's supposed to be this sort of nerdy guy and living in the suburbs, so I think I fit the bill.
I wanna Okay, so again, because I understand, like, these are all areas I know as I'm reading it, I just enjoyed being in Martin's world as much as Judy's. Also, something that I want to shout out is that you have some very real scenes where Martin is having panic attacks. I'm curious, like, what kind of research did you do for getting that part right? Because like oh, really?
My own. Oh yeah, yeah. I'm well familiar with panic attacks. So
I think it really adds a depth to it because it's it's really hard to strike a balance between what would this is still a story, and yet we also have to have enough consequence. Like how it needs to still be the real world enough that there are consequences to what he's learning. And the fact that he's trying to keep this secret bottled up inside start to exhibit in these panic attacks. And it feels very visceral and it makes you feel the reality of the world more.
well, good. Yeah, I wanted it to be very realistic. I wanted it to be, this is a story about a woman who puts on a mask and a costume, a Batman kind of character. How realistic is that? Climbing around on buildings and swinging on ropes and stuff. But I do have her get beat up.
Mm-hmm.
She gets hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's dangerous, and she takes a lot of risks. Yeah. She encounters racism and all the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that's happening in the late 50s and early 60s, and
It's a
I
really
wanted to
good
bring all that in.
time
Yeah.
change. Like
Yeah.
really, because like we have JFK show up. I also really do like that. So there's in the second book you have the film reel.
Oh, right.
And
Yeah.
that's just a beautiful little touch because you have that moment where Martin's watching it and he's like just marveling at this as his mom. And it's a great way because it opens the book. It's a great way of recapping what we know to set up for the story because you can still read it independent of the other ones.
Yeah.
But also just it's intriguing because all of a sudden it's just this is what you're seeing. And I at least I know in my case, anytime I like look at old pictures of my mom or see old videos, I'm like, oh wow, my mom back like in the 90s, like they're just different because I'm used to my mom now. And it has this, it gives you instant emotion and feeling and makes him very believable. There's a book by Matt Bird called The Secrets of Character. And he talks about making characters unique, giving them believability means knowing that they have specific tastes, that they have emotions, all these things. when we are dropped into this world that is different than ours, the fact that Martin instantly goes through these emotions creates a connection with the reader that I think really makes it enhances the believability of the world to then ask us to believe things like a woman jumping off rooftops.
Well, yeah. Also, you mentioned JFK.
Hmm.
The whole Kennedy girls thing,
Hmm.
that was real. There were that was a group that
Hmm.
that existed. And I found a Kennedy girl that I could talk to, and she gave me all that information, what songs they sang and how it worked and all that stuff. So, that's real.
The other thing I really appreciate is that because she works at a boxing gym in New York, because
Yeah.
it's a great thing because there's enough conflict like inherently there because she's a girl in the 60s in a boxing gym. But I'm also a big gym nut. So like when they describe, oh, the exercise stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember those. That's great.
Yeah. Well, uh, I had to find a way where she could learn how to fight and stuff. And
Hmm.
we're talking late 1950s, and how did girls do that? Um, so being a janitor at a, at a gym, and then convincing the owner to teach her secretly, kind of $1 million baby scenario.
Hmm.
You see that? Um, so that kind of worked, and then finding the Asian guy to
Hmm.
teach her martial arts. Um, that helped too. The whole Chinatown stuff. And no, I just loved writing these books. I mean, I had a
Hmm.
great time doing it. I mean, it was hard work, but I loved the research. I loved,
Was there
you
a
know,
favorite fact that you learned in researching that you were like, I don't know how to use this in the book, but I'm definitely going to find a use for it in the book?
well, I think probably my favorite thing, was the Kennedy girl stuff. I mean, I knew
Hmm.
how I would use it, immediately knew how I would use it, but just learning finding out this stuff. And, I'm old enough to remember Kennedy running for president.
Hmm.
I remember those ads on television where they're singing High Hopes. I kind of remember that. I was very young, but
Hmm.
when I saw on YouTube, repeat, old movie clips of the television ads for Kennedy. Um, I went, God, that's familiar. God, I kind of remember that. That's like a kernel of remembrance in my brain. I recognize that. So it was all fun to do. And I consulted with the Kennedy Library and
Hmm.
stuff like that. Yeah, I was always consulting, here and there,
Hmm.
all the places and restaurants and uh,
Oh, wait, so
places.
that diner that she goes to in New York, I'm curious, is this a real place?
It is a fictional place, but it's based
Okay.
on real diners that exist still today in New York. I just had to have it conveniently placed, so I made it up.
Okay, yeah.
But it is exactly like you know some of the diners that still exist that have been around that long. Yeah,
We talked about reading in voice when there's the character, I can't remember the FBI agent's name that she kind of dates in the
yeah.
second
Well,
book.
yeah. It's been
Yeah.
15 years since I wrote the first book and 10 years since the last book came out. So it's even I don't remember everybody's names and things like that. Yeah.
Uh, every time I heard his voice for I don't know if it was because the dictaphone. So again, a great little touch is that when we get his perspective in the book, it's like the dictaphone reading, which again just adds a different type of literal voice to the story. But
Uh-huh.
for whatever reason, I thought of like Charlton Heston when he was reading because like it then fits because then when you see him because he shows up at the end of the book as an older retired man, it fits because you know what Charlton Heston looks like as
Yeah.
young Charlton Heston and then old Charlton Heston.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure he would have been good casting back then. Young and old. I don't know. I don't know who I. Very often when I'm writing books, I will
Hmm.
I will cast the
Yeah.
character in my mind, like
So
what, and that helps me create their voice.
yeah.
Um, I know you're gonna laugh. For Martin, it was Steve Carell.
Okay, that's amazing. That's perfect because I just watched Crazy Stupid Love last night,
Yeah,
and I you that fits. That is
I
so
know he's perfect. He would have been perfect. Well, especially 10 years ago, he would have been perfect in that role. Um, for Judy, young
yeah.
Judy, it was I had maybe like Jessica Lange as old Judy, or
That
somebody like
works.
that.
Yeah.
Somebody like that. But it would have to be two different actresses, a
hmm
young actor. I mean, Jennifer Garner in her Alias days, but that was the '90s. So,
hmm
in the early 2000s, I think she was probably too old. You needed somebody, 20, 21,
hmm
22, at that time. And I really didn't know.
hmm
It would have had to have been an unknown, somebody, a
Yeah.
discovery on Hollywood's part.
It,
Um,
I think that I just want to shout out here. I think that when Hollywood inevitably does make the Black Stiletto series, what is going to happen is this is going to be like with Sean Connery, where relatively unknown actor that
yeah,
has their defining role in
yeah,
playing this character.
yeah. Well, that's kind of what I'm hoping. And then they populate all the other characters with more well-known actors. Like in the first book, it was Robert De Niro as Ranelli.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah, that was who I was picturing when I wrote him. So, and each book has a third voice. It's always
Yeah.
Judy Martin and a third
hmm
voice for each book.
hmm
Um, the second one is the FBI agent. The third one is who is the third one in the third book? Oh, was it the woman doctor? Yes, the woman
Yes.
doctor.
hmm
Yeah,
Oh, who did you cast for her in your head?
can't remember.
That's okay.
Yeah, I don't remember. And then in the fourth book, I bring in two voices. We
hmm
get Leo
hmm
and the daughter.
Okay, so you make a comment about Leo having like Paul Newman eyes
Yeah, yeah.
multiple times. Did you actually like think of a slightly shorter
That's
Paul Newman?
I did actually. I somebody like Paul Newman was my guy. Yeah,
hmm
for uh-huh.
Which again, what I oh wait, what was the sister?
The sister. Oh,
Yeah, Leo's
oh right,
sister,
Christina.
Christina.
Uh, yeah, that would be somebody. Another role that would be interesting to cast. Somebody like I don't
Because
know, Jessica Chastain with black hair.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
something like that. She had to be beautiful, but it could be really intense and
Uh-huh. Well, she has
scary.
such a great femme fatale energy, but
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah,
Bonnie Parker femme fatale.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it would be a tough role to cast, but somebody good.
hmm
Sort of a Famke Janssen from Goldeneye.
Yes.
Something like that.
hmm So this has been a wonderful conversation. Where a um this is a totally random thing, but like, are there going to be audiobooks ever of the
There
Black
already
Stiletto?
are.
There
There
already
already are.
are. I need
Yeah,
to find these. Okay, I
yeah.
am
They're on
that
Audible. They're on
perfect.
Audible. You have to download them. They're not physical.
Oh, that's okay.
So yeah, and they're very good because they use a male and a female voice.
Oh, good. So
So they're
I'm the
very good.
nerd that is I'm the perfect book buyer because I want the physical copies for the shelf. I want the digital version for me to read at my convenience. And then I love having the audiobook version because that way, especially if it's a book I've already read, I can just kind of play it in the background as I'm doing something else. And
Right.
I'm a road trip guy, so
Oh
having a
yeah.
good audiobook to make the trip with. So
Uh-huh.
I am definitely looking this up now.
Yeah. I think they're available as the five individual books. I don't think
hmm
the collection is available as an audiobook. But
Yeah.
the five, there is a collection for ebooks,
hmm
with all
I
five in one.
It was perfect timing. So I had gotten the first one on ebook, I think before our interview, first one. And then like literally 2 days later, I had seen that the complete collection went on sale and I was like, oh, just grab it now. And it was great because I could just binge from book to book to book to book
Yeah.
because especially 4 and 5, I can't. Okay, how much time was in between those two releases? Because
Uh, they both came out in 14. It was early 14 and late 14.
okay,
So yeah, I think
because
the first Secrets and Lies came out in January or February of 2014, and Endings and Beginnings came out either in November or December.
I having to wait in between, this is the good and bad thing. I can't be there in the instant when we can just eat it up, but also I can just binge. And
Yeah, yeah,
that's so
yeah.
people,
These books are meant for binging.
these
You know.
books are meant for binging because hey, they're page turners.
Yeah.
What do you have going on right now?
Well, I've been working on a secret project that I can't talk about,
Ooh.
um, but hopefully we'll be able to talk about it soon. I've also been ghostwriting, um,
Hmm.
which is nice, lucrative bread and butter work.
Hmm.
My last book came out in 2022. It was The Mad
Hmm.
Mad Murders of Marigold Way.
Which is utterly amazing. And as a shout out again for writing in a place, because it's set in the Chicagoland suburbs, and it could be any suburbs, but
Well, it's really
there's
mine, but I
yeah,
changed the name.
yeah. How did your neighbors feel? I'm genuinely curious.
Oh, I have a few neighbors who have read it and they love it. They just go, "Oh, I kind of recognize that, and I recognize that," you know. So, yeah. Well, see that book came about because of COVID.
Hmm.
I wrote it the first summer of COVID,
Hmm.
and that was, March, April, May, June of 2020. Remember how we all were then? We were all very
Yeah.
paranoid. We were scared. We were all
Hmm.
staying in. We were wearing masks. You'd go out for a walk and people would walk by. You'd kind of, not get near them. I thought this is the perfect milieu for a murder mystery,
It really was.
and
I,
it was so absurd that it
uh-huh.
was funny.
Yes.
So I made it a dark comedy.
Hmm.
So some people some people didn't know what to make of it, but a lot of people who got it really likes it. So and
Hmm.
it won
Well,
some awards, and
it's such a
I'm
great
happy.
representation of that time. Like that's really, if I had to go with what is an accurate, if I had to like think back on 2020, opening the Mad Mad Murders of Marigold Way, like it describes it without any exaggeration is the thing. Like this is what the time period looked like.
Yeah, 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 and it was absurd like that
Hmm.
too. Just like the way the people are acting. Everybody's an idiot in this book.
Yes.
They're all stupid. And I loved it. It's like a Coen Brothers movie, When you
Yes.
when you when you see the Coen Brothers movies, they made movies for smart people about stupid people.
Yes. Okay, I now really want the Coen brothers adaptation of the Mad Mad Murders of Marigold
I,
Way.
I know, me too.
That would be so cool. Okay, so then quick casting question. Who would be the protagonist
In
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 Mad
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 Murders of
Murders,
yeah.
Bradley Cooper was who I had in
Ooh,
mind.
that's a really that's good casting there.
Yeah, that's who I had in mind. He might be a little older now, but he could probably still do it.
Yeah.
And who for the woman? Somebody like, oh, wow, I had somebody in mind. Now I can't think of it. Um, Somebody Jewish and
Hmm.
beautiful and curly
Hmm.
hair.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's a fantastic book. Mad Mad Murders of Marigold Way. I love mysteries. I love noir, and you do a great job of it is absurd. It's a story about people making dumb choices, which is like I think the hallmark of noir is you take people and watch as they consecutively make terrible decisions
Yeah.
and then have like their slight comeuppance in just the right way. Like again, delicious, an unexpected delight. So
Yeah.
people really do need to check it out.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite works that I've done. So
Hmm.
I think I'm slowing down. I mean, I'm getting older. I used to put out two books, average two books a year. It's been, I mean, I have been ghostwriting, so I'm
Yeah.
still
Yeah, you're
constantly
still
working.
constantly writing.
Uh, but like my last book was 2022, but my next book may be 2025. So we'll see.
Okay. Fingers
All
crossed,
right.
looking forward to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just with ghostwriting, when you're doing that, do you have to modulate your own voice at all? Are you like trying to match someone else's? I'm just like curious how that works in the technical element for you.
Yes and no. Yes and no. It kind of for the projects I've been doing, not necessarily.
Hmm.
So, and they are fiction. They're not nonfiction. So, but if you were ghostwriting for a particular established character,
Hmm.
that's a different story. You might have to, try to do that. I mean, I didn't have to do that with Bond exactly.
Hmm.
Back in the 90s, they told me, there was no, they didn't want you to try to mimic
Yeah,
Ian Fleming because Fleming wrote in the 50s and the 60s, and
yeah,
the style of thrillers
have
in the
changed.
90s and that had changed.
Hmm.
They wanted me to be faithful to the spirit of Fleming,
Hmm.
to the spirit of the books, to the tone,
Hmm.
to the world, to the universe, not write like he wrote, the
Well,
prose.
and I think that like obviously I don't want to spend too much time talking about your Bond novels because talk about them and you get asked about them all the time. But
Uh,
I love the fact that you keep it very fun and sexy and that that's just not qualities that we get too often in there. We're not trying to be I like a lot of the recent ones, but a lot of the recent ones, they're really trying for that stylistic. We're doing it this way, this type. Okay, fine, great. But it kind of loses some of the fun at times. And yours maintain a great version of it feels like Fleming's character. And it's just a ripping good story. Like I read one of the other spin-off books, and it just was long, it was dragging, it was boring. I can read through one of yours and just enjoy every page. It's just start and hit the accelerator and get to the end. High Time to Kill is still one of my all-time favorite Bond novels. I need to get I have people listening on audio can't see this, but I have a couple of the first US editions behind me. I want to find High Time to Kill in the first edition because that one is my like chef's kiss. Like the mountain climbing in it is such a great sports element, and it has that entire golf sequence.
that's my favorite too. It is. I think it'd make a great movie too. But you know,
There aren't a okay, so we had Bond Life Chicago, Blake Powers on, and we just did a whole episode talking about High Time to Kill. And one of our main things was why isn't mountaineering more of like a cinematic thing? Like there's the one Sylvester Stallone movie that I can't
cliffhanger,
remember. Cliffhanger.
cliffhanger.
But beyond that, there aren't a lot of movies I can think of that like
Yeah,
have
not
this
many.
huge mountaineering element. And it's really such a great set piece
It
of
is.
the
Well, it's
film.
very visual for one thing.
Hmm.
Maybe it's because the movement is so slow. You got to go. but
Another metaphor for writing.
people fall, people are climbing, and people drop. There's all kinds of things you can do to make it exciting. Listen to me, Hollywood.
Eon Productions, please give us High Time to Kill as the first film in the rebooted Bond series. Bond 26? 20,
I think so.
I
Yeah, I
think it's
think that's what
26.
it is.
Bond 26, High Time to Kill. Starting the petition now.
Yeah, yeah. It would be nice, but hey. All
We're just
right.
two guys on the internet.
I
Raymond,
know.
this has been a delight. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
RaymondBenson.com. And if you're on Facebook, I have a very active personal Facebook page, which almost has the limit of followers, but there's still room. And then also on Facebook, there's my author page, but I only post, news
Hmm.
about my books there. my everyday activities and stuff is on my personal page, and
Hmm.
that's more fun.
Yeah.
That's where I post, my music interests and concerts I've seen and things like that.
Which, just one quick more plug for the Black Stiletto. One of the things that is really fun in it is you do a great job of tracking like the trajectory of pop culture in the 60s because you have music that pops up a lot. She loves
Yeah,
Elvis. And then you also will comment, especially when they get to LA, the movies of the time.
yeah, yeah.
And it's so much fun because you can tell reading it that this isn't you just grabbing things. These are things that you've enjoyed and have comments and thoughts on.
Right. There is a Black Stiletto website, the blackstiletto.net, the
Okay.
blackstiletto.net.
Hmm.
And there have you seen the trailers that I made for the books? There was a
No.
trailer for the first book and a trailer for the third book. But the trailer for the
Okay.
first book is quite elaborate. We cast it, there's a costume and everything.
Awesome.
We shot it in LA.
Uh-huh.
It's
W-
it's it's quite the production. So go, or you can find it on YouTube too. You could just,
Mm-hmm.
the Black Stiletto trailer, book trailer.
Mm-hmm.
You should
Well,
be able.
we'll definitely link that in the show notes along with the rest of your links.
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
All right.
Raymond,
Well,
thank
thanks
you
for having
again.
me on, Terrence.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
Yeah. Thank you. See you later.